So we have to be a part, if we want to remain globalized, we want to remain open, we have to be a part of this new financial architecture. And that's why this G20 initiative is important. The G20 initiative is to try and have a coordinated move, because without that coordination, what one country can do, other can undo. Okay, so this coordination has to be very importantly done, and that's where the new initiative in the United Nations, okay, of re-architecturing, that's a very important step, and India must suggest new steps there. And as I said, because the problem is originating from the financial markets, okay, this financial markets have to be dealing from the real markets, and that must be in a coordinated manner all over the world. Then this mark to market must be coordinated all over the world. Okay, so Indian government, apart from the steps it's taking internally to raise the raise demand, so is raising demand in the rural areas by, say, talking about rural infrastructure, etc. Same in China, they've got a $600 billion package over 2 years where they're spending a lot of money in rural areas and other such things. These will work provided the other architecture of the international thing is there, and for that the Indian government will have to lobby together in the G20 with the other countries to see that that becomes effective. If that kind of coordination does not take place, then everybody starts closing in their economy, and then India would also have to take a hard step about what to do about closing the economy. Okay, this closing would be relative, and that would be required only as a last resort when others do not follow through with the coordinated steps. So there's some very, very tough decisions, very hard decision on financial re-architecturing, on creating the institutions, because the institutional base that's a problem. So the new kind of institutions in the financial sector, in the way the fiscal deficit will work, all that would have to be done. So in other words, these are all very tough because none of this has happened, none of this has been done. It's in that sense that it's tough, it's all new, it's out of the box.
Correct. Please. Yes.
In the financial sector, everything, all borrowing and lending is on valuations. Now with this crisis, valuations fell, so there was a loss with the institution, with valuation, there was a loss for the investor with his money. Has anyone made any money out of the crisis, or has anyone only suffered a loss?
Well, as you know, in the market, there are always bulls and bears. Okay, bears are those people who depend on the prices to decline. Okay, and I'm sure there are some people in the market who are bears who probably made money by speculating that the prices will fall. Okay, so they've been selling. So, but what happens is that, you see, when does this bulls and bears thing stop? When you get into a corner solution where everybody wants to sell, and that's when the collapse sets in. Then nobody makes money. Okay, that's one. Okay, then it's possible that there are people like Ranbaxy who sold out just before the collapse set in. They're sitting on a pile of money. And there are certain companies like that who sold out just before the collapse started setting in July, August. Okay, so there's some people like that who'd be flush with funds. Okay, of course,
yes,
you asked me whether some people did.
Obviously.
You're right. But
yes,
you asked me whether some people
some
did. I'm only pointing out that some such thing. But overall, even those people who are in the financial markets, who are making big bonuses, huge amounts of money, even they've lost, because after all, where did they invest? They invested back into the same things.
Correct.
So, you can say, for instance, the news that Mittals, okay, their wealth has come down from $50 billion to, say, $18 billion. They have a battery of advisors and financial experts, etc., who advise. And so if entities like that, all the top billionaires in India or all over the world, they've lost heavily in spite of everybody. So almost everybody's lost, but then there are rare cases like bears, etc., who would have made some money.
Please.
Okay, so you're asking whether a basic change would take place or not with this new financial, and I think that's a good question to ask. Oh, the carbon economy. Okay. I thought you meant the environment in terms of the financial environment. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You see, what my suspicion is that all companies are going to cut costs wherever possible. And under that circumstances, environment would be a far lower importance than earlier. That's one. Companies, say like for instance, spending on advertising would be cut. Companies spending on NGOs would be cut as their profits fall, because that would be the first way to try and prevent the profits from falling. So all these kind of things that the companies are doing as a social responsibility, all those aspects will come down as the crisis deepens. So therefore, I feel bad. But in the alternative, those people who are talking about alternatives in the last 2 months, they are arguing that keeping the environmental concern going would be an important alternative as far as the restructuring is concerned. But as far as the major companies and the governments are concerned, nobody is really looking at that.
We'll have one last question, please.
Amal.
Ah.
As financial sectors are concerned, particularly banking, there are so many regulations have come in this past, particularly after 91. Say Basel II, there are minimum capital requirements, there are some exposure norms. Despite their Western countries, European and US, they are already implemented all these stricter norms. Then why so? That means they have not implemented those norms properly.
Yes.
You see, partly that is true, but partly, as I said, is the problem that you see markets have one part which is regulated, the other part which is deregulated. So what does a CRR do? A CRR says the multiplier can only be this much, but cannot be beyond that. Okay, so depending on your money practices, the CRR may be 7%, okay, and therefore result in a money creation which is say 7 times rather than 14 times, okay, because of leakages and other things. So it gives a stability. In the deregulated part, where the gearing ratio kept on rising, rose to 30, 33, 40, 50, there's no deregulation, okay. And when financial entities move, as I said, you see the tax havens, for instance. When this Fortis Bank in Netherlands failed, then according to the story that has come out, the government took over the Fortis Bank and found that Fortis Bank had 700 subsidiaries in offshore banking places. And what were these for? These were for cycling. So banks were enabling people to recycle their money into tax havens. Okay. Now this kind of thing, where even though Fortis is regulated, but it's doing many things which are deregulated. Okay, so why is it that banks like Citibank, which is after all a regulated bank, got into problem? Because they were indulging in all these things, and a large part of their profit was coming out of these tax havens, etc., and that was coming out of leveraging, etc., etc. And therefore the failure is a result of the fact that even though you have regulation in one part, but a huge part of the financial markets are completely deregulated. Okay. So even though on the formal part of the banking system you had Basel norms and Basel I, Basel II and various other things, but that did not prevent the financial markets from getting into the problem of which these themselves are a problem. So you can ask yourself the question that many companies, real companies like Tata's, went and bought Tata Chorus, then went and bought Jaguar and Rover at very high prices. Even at that time, everybody said these are very high priced, but for sake of prestige, they went in and bought it. Today, there's a gaping hole of maybe $15 to $16 billion in the Tata's balance sheet as a result of that. So when you do leave